Picture this. You're up 2-0 against the reigning World Cup champions. You've got 11 minutes left on the clock to hold on and make history. And somehow you still lose. That's not a hypothetical scenario I'm making up to grab your attention. That's exactly what happened to Egypt against Argentina, and it's why, just minutes after the final whistle, their own striker stood in front of a camera and said the word unfair 4 times in a row. Not once. Not twice. 4 times, back to back, like he needed to repeat it that many times before it actually felt real. So what really happened out there in Atlanta? Was Egypt genuinely cheated out of one of the great World Cup upsets? Or did a heartbroken team just need somewhere to point the finger after blowing a 2-goal lead in the final half hour? Stick with me here, because the honest answer sits somewhere in between, and that's exactly what makes this one of the messiest, most talked about controversies of the entire tournament. Before we go any further, let's actually rewind and look at how this match unfolded, because you genuinely can't understand why the anger afterward ran this deep without first seeing exactly what Egypt was on the verge of pulling off. Egypt had never, in their entire footballing history, reached a World Cup quarterfinal. Argentina, on the other hand, walked into this match as reigning world champions, with Lionel Messi still leading the line. On paper, this should have been a formality for the champions. Instead, for close to an hour of actual football, Egypt were the better side, and they were genuinely threatening one of the great shocks in tournament history. Here's how it unfolded. Around the hour mark, Mohamed Salah slipped a perfectly weighted-through ball to Mustafa Ziko, who calmly lifted it over the onrushing Emiliano Martinez and into the net. The Egyptian bench emptied instantly. Fans back home in Cairo were watching what looked like the beginning of history. And then, almost as quickly as it happened, it was taken away. The referee, Francois Letexier, was called over to the pitch-side monitor by the video assistant referee. After reviewing the footage, he ruled the goal out. Now here's the part that turned a routine review into a full-blown storm. The disallowed goal wasn't for anything that happened anywhere near the Argentina goal. It was for a challenge that happened roughly 100 yards away, right outside Egypt's own penalty box, more than 20 seconds before the ball ever ended up in the net. Replays showed an Egyptian player appearing to step on Lisandro Martinez's foot while also tugging at his shirt, at the exact moment Egypt won possession back. The referee actually saw that challenge live, in real time, and waved play on without a second thought. It took a slow-motion replay, more than 20 seconds and an entire length of the pitch later, to make him change his mind. Think about that. The man whose entire job is to make that judgment call decided instantly there was nothing worth stopping the game for. It took a camera in a truck, and a review stretching back through an entire build-up, to arrive at the opposite conclusion. So was this actually allowed under the rules? Technically, yes. Under IFAB's laws and FIFA's VAR protocol, officials are required to review the entire attacking phase leading up to a goal. If the attacking team commits any foul anywhere in that same unbroken possession, the goal gets wiped off, no matter how far back it happened. Since Egypt won the ball directly from that contested challenge and kept possession through to Zico's finish, VAR was technically within its rights to step in. On paper, nothing was broken. But almost nobody who watched this live thought that's how the rule was supposed to work in practice. Former Premier League referee Mark Clattenburg said this kind of decision wasn't consistent with how the tournament had been officiated up to that point, and that whether it was even a foul was a genuinely subjective call, not some clear and undeniable error. He described it as VAR digging way too deep, across too many passes and too much distance, purely to cancel out an Egyptian goal. Former England goalkeeper Rob Green said it was barely a foul at all, that it happened almost a full pitch away, and questioned how that could possibly fall within VAR's job description. His point was simple: stepping on somebody's toe from 100 yards out isn't the kind of moment VAR was designed to hunt for. And here's a question worth sitting with. If the referee himself, watching it happen live, didn't think it was worth stopping play for, how far back should a screen in a truck somewhere be allowed to go before it starts undoing what actually happened on the pitch? Now, before we get to what everyone said afterward, It's worth pointing out that Egypt didn't fall apart after losing that goal, and this detail matters a lot for everything that follows. Ziko scored again in the 67th minute to restore the two-goal cushion, and for a while it genuinely looked like the disallowed goal would just become a footnote to a famous upset. It did not stay a footnote. Argentina pulled one back in the 79th minute. Messi leveled it from the penalty spot in the 83rd. Then, deep into stoppage time, Messi struck again with a stunning volley to make it 2-2. And just when extra time looked inevitable, Enzo Fernandez rose to head home a dramatic winner, sending Egypt crashing out 3-2 in what's already being described as one of the great collapses, or one of the great comebacks, depending which side of the result you're standing on. Here's the part that made Egypt's complaints so much louder, though. It wasn't the only VAR moment they walked away furious about. In the exact build-up to Argentina's winning goal, Egypt felt there was a clear foul by Alexis Mac Allister that never even got checked. In that same passage of play, Salah genuinely believed he'd won a penalty. Instead, the ball went the other way, and Argentina scored the goal that ended Egypt's World Cup. Line it up, a goal wiped off for a shirt pull 100 yards from where it mattered, no review on a foul in the build-up to the equalizer, and no review on a possible penalty in the build-up to the winner. 3 separate moments, same match, same team, same direction. That's the pattern Egypt walked off convinced they just lived through. Which brings us to the press conference, and honestly, this is where the whole story shifts gears. Egypt's head coach, Hassam Hassan, did not hold back. "We haven't seen respect or fair play," he said, laying out his complaints one by one. A penalty waved away, a second potential penalty VAR never reviewed, and a goal he called remarkably disallowed. He said he wasn't convinced by the outcome or by how the match had unfolded, and refused to dress it up with polite talk about hard luck. His players, he said, had suffered a genuine injustice. Then Hassan went somewhere most coaches never go after a loss. He suggested there had been outside pressure on the referee himself. There seemed to have been pressure on the Argentinian side on the referee that brought about this outcome, he said. At one point his press conference turned almost philosophical. Life is unfair. The world is unfair. Okay, but why isn't there any fairness in sports? I'm not convinced by this outcome. The referee is unfair. God is sufficient for me and the best disposer of affairs. He's wasting the effort of an entire nation. The cup is directed towards Argentina. Speaking separately to be in sports, Hassan floated a theory tying it directly to Messi's status and Argentina's as champions. Maybe, he suggested, officials wanted the champions, and Messi's story, to keep going. Hassan wasn't a neutral bystander describing all this from a distance either. He was right in the middle of the chaos himself. 9 minutes into stoppage time, he was shown a yellow card for objecting to the lack of a VAR review. He recalled telling the referee, "This is unfair. This is unfair," adding, "Maybe he has something to hide." Whoever has something to hide sometimes fails to hide what he is hiding, and this was exactly what I felt during that conversation. He also revealed Egypt had objected to Letexier being the referee before the match even kicked off, pointing to Letexier's French background as the reason, a serious claim suggesting Egypt's federation had concerns about this official before a ball was kicked. By the time it was over, Hassan said that once he got home he wouldn't be watching a single match of the rest of the World Cup, calling it his own way of protesting. He also questioned the noon kickoff time in Atlanta, pointing out the other round of 16 match that day started at 4 p.m. in Vancouver. Whoever schedules these matches, he said, has clearly never played football himself. The raw numbers from that match tell their own story. By full time, Egypt had 5 yellow cards. Argentina had 0. Letexier also showed a straight red card to a member of Hassan's own coaching staff during the chaos after Argentina's winner. 5 yellows and a red for the team that led for most of the match, against nothing for the team that came from behind and won. Make of that whatever you want, but it's the kind of imbalance that tends to fuel exactly the sort of conspiracy talk this match generated online within minutes. There's one more moment that had nothing to do with fouls or goals at all, and it might be the most serious unresolved thread hanging over the whole thing. Late in the game, Hassan crossed his arms to form an X, directed at the officials, the internationally recognized signal under FIFA's own guidelines for reporting racist abuse. Once a referee acknowledges that gesture, it's supposed to trigger a strict three-step protocol: a pause in the match, then a suspension if the abuse continues, and abandonment if it still doesn't stop. None of that happened. Hassan was simply shown a yellow card, and play continued, with no public explanation for the booking or for why the anti-racism protocol wasn't triggered. Days later, that thread is still completely unresolved, and it's arguably the part of this whole story that deserves the most follow-up. So by full time, Egypt's coach had accused the tournament of favoring the champions, suggested the referee had something to hide, questioned the choice of official and the kickoff time, and watched his own anti-racism signal answered with nothing more than a routine card. And that's before his star striker even opened his mouth. If Hassan's press conference was controlled anger, Mustafa Ziko's on-field interview, delivered minutes after the whistle while he was still catching his breath, was something rawer. "Congratulations to Argentina on the World Cup. The tournament was rigged," he said before calling the referee unfair, 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 4 times in a row. Later, talking about the disallowed goal specifically, he widened the accusation. It was a rigged game. That referee. It seems like this match was rigged. We were winning 2-0 and he kept coming at us. Congratulations to Argentina on another World Cup. Ziko and Hassan weren't the only voices asking the obvious follow-up question: would this exact call have gone the same way against a bigger name in a different shirt? Egyptian football expert Ahmed Yaqub, on BBC Radio 5 Live, echoed almost the identical complaint, pointing to how inconsistently VAR had been applied and how far back officials seemed willing to reach. His question was simple: if that had been Messi, would the outcome have been the same? That question didn't stay confined to Egyptian voices either. Former Liverpool defender Jamie Carragher, with zero connection to either team, watched the replay and didn't hedge. "I am telling you that if that was against another team, it would have been awarded as a goal," he said. "If that was in the Premier League, La Liga or Serie A, it would have been a goal even after VAR review. There is a lot of inconsistency lately in this tournament. When a neutral pundit says that on live television, it stops being one team's grievance and starts becoming a genuine talking point for the whole sport." Once Argentina completed the comeback, all that built-up tension boiled over. A furious confrontation broke out around the final whistle, and one Egypt staffer was shown a red card in the chaos. Social media picked up exactly where Ziko and Hassan left off. "The World Cup is rigged for Messi," one fan posted. Another wrote, "This tournament is rigged, corruption at display, robbing Egypt of the goal." This wasn't the first VAR flashpoint of the tournament either. Fans had already been primed by the retroactive red card shown to USMNT's Folarin Balogun for a challenge that wasn't flagged as a foul live, or Croatia's equalizer against Portugal wiped out because a sensor detected an offside margin the width of a hair. The Balogun situation had its own twist too. FIFA postponed his suspension so he could play against Belgium, leaving fans and federations furious in its own right. So when Egypt's complaint arrived, it landed as the loudest version yet of a complaint several nations had already been making. Once the raw emotion settled, a different group started picking the decision apart: broadcasters, former referees, tactical analysts. Their verdict didn't fully clear the officials, but it didn't fully back Egypt's version either. Al Jazeera's own breakdown reached the same technical conclusion as the law itself. VAR was within its remit, because the protocol allows review of any attacking team offense anywhere in the build-up, not just the final seconds. No rule was broken. But nearly every analyst who looked closely still felt the outcome was wrong. Writing for The Athletic, Graham Scott called it an astonishing intervention, a serious overreach of VAR's actual job, which is correcting only clear and obvious errors. He explained why distance and time matter. The longer the gap between a challenge and the goal, the more serious that offense needs to be to justify wiping the whole thing off the board. BBC reporter Dale Johnson focused on the inconsistency angle, pointing out the tournament had generally been officiated with a light touch elsewhere, making it jarring to see a goal chalked off for such a minimal shirt tug. Henry Winter used dry humor to describe what Egypt lost, noting the move covered 80 yards and would have ranked among the goals of the tournament. Former England goalkeeper Paul Robinson tied it back to Egypt's larger pattern of frustration, noting they'd also been denied a review on the foul in the build-up to Argentina's winner. Here's a stat that puts Egypt's case into a bigger frame. Across the tournament, VAR had reviewed 12 goals for fouls in the build-up, and all 12 were ruled out. 12 for 12, without exception. Egypt's disallowed goal wasn't an isolated outlier. It was case number 12 in a perfect streak. A Fox Sports Rules analyst explained why the referee missed the contact live in the first place. His viewing angle from that corner of the pitch wasn't good enough, and the assistant was positioned too far away. But that same analyst acknowledged what this costs the game as a spectacle, estimating that roughly 3/4 of the time a VAR review takes away something exciting, and the other quarter it produces something painful to watch. Both things can be true at once. The rule was applied correctly, and it still felt like a robbery. Let's not forget the other side of this story. Messi didn't celebrate the comeback like a man who felt entitled to it. He was in tears after the final whistle. He'd also missed a penalty of his own earlier in the match, a detail buried under the VAR storm, making him the player with the most missed penalties in World Cup history, even as the equalizer moved him one clear of Mbappe and Haaland in the Golden Boot race. Argentina's coach, Lionel Scaloni, gave a very different account, crediting resilience rather than engaging with the officiating debate at all. If you analyze the match, it was always Argentina's match, but they had really good moments. I think we had 3 or 4 clear chances in the first half. But you don't get a goal, and they're 2 goals ahead and they feel comfortable. So you have to keep digging and digging and digging, and that's what we did. Notice what's missing from that quote entirely: any mention of the disallowed goal. 2 dressing rooms, 1 match, 2 completely different stories, one about resilience, the other about injustice. So where does this leave things days later? Hassan's boycott vow still stands. Whether Egypt's federation files a formal complaint with FIFA over the officiating or the anti-racism gesture remains unresolved. There's also a harder truth Egypt's camp doesn't seem eager to acknowledge. None of this changes the fact that a team leading by 2 goals conceded 3 times in roughly 25 minutes. Egypt had this game in hand for most of the second half, and it slipped away in a stretch so short it's already being replayed as one of the great collapses, or comebacks, of the tournament. Both things can be true at once. The disallowed goal was, by the letter of the law, defensible. It was also one of the harshest applications of that law anyone had seen all tournament. That combination is exactly why rigged is still the word following this match days later. So what happens now? Egypt is out. Argentina moves on to face the winner of Colombia and Switzerland. And whether FIFA changes anything about how far back VAR is allowed to reach is really the question hanging over the rest of this tournament.